A recent episode of Star Talk had Neil deGrasse Tyson discussing Mercury Retrograde. He attempted to debunk the idea by claiming that retrogression is an illusion from the old days before science, when nobody cared to do any experiments to see if illusions were real or not. First, let's tackle the question of whether or not retrogression is an illusion. So let me be perfectly plain. Retrogression is not an illusion. Retrogression is an objectively verifiable, empirically verifiable phenomenon of astrological observation. Planets literally slow down in their movement, come to a stop, move backwards in retrogression, slow down again, come to a stop, and resume their forward motion. That literally, objectively, verifiably, experimentally, verifiably happens. So this is not an artifact from a pre-Copernican worldview. Now let's talk about heliocentrism and see if that causes the idea of retrogression to become an illusion. So if you were on the sun, as heliocentric means, if the sun were the center of your observational loci, would you ever observe a retrogression? No. Does that make retrogression an illusion? No. It just means that retrogression is a phenomenon which only occurs for people observing the skies from the Earth. It's a reality for people observing the planets from Earth, and not a reality for people observing the planets from somewhere else, like the sun. So that brings up a difficult philosophical prospect, which is a really important point, and it's not just something for philosophers to discuss. It's a really important point for your family, your society, your personal life. It's the concept of multiple truths coexisting. And you find that the people who really have a hard time grasping this concept are the zealots and the proselytizers, whether they are the scientific ones or the religious dogmatic ones. The zealots, who are really into what they're saying, and the proselytizers, who really want to make you see the world the way they see it, have a hard time understanding that multiple versions of reality coexist simultaneously in one objective reality. So for example, in this case, for people who exist on the Earth and observe the skies, the planets literally, verifiably, empirically move backwards in retrogression. But for people who might be observing the universe from some different location other than the Earth, for those people and for that observation, there would never be such a thing as retrogression. These two people, these two vantage points, can both coexist in one reality. This is why you can have geocentric realities coexist with heliocentric realities. The heliocentric model doesn't cancel the geocentric model, nor vice versa. They're both truths and realities from two viewpoints. One viewpoint is centered on the helios, the sun, and the other is centered on the earth, geos. So that's why you can have one universe that conceives of the sun rising, planets going retrograde, the earth being relatively flat, coexist in the same reality as the universe where you see the earth spinning and you see planets always moving forward and you see the earth as a globe. These two realities coexist together depending on your vantage point. Now, should astrology move into the present and become heliocentric? Some people think so. Apparently, Neil deGrasse Tyson would like astrology better if it was heliocentric. But the truth about astrology is literally every single thing about its foundations is implicitly geocentric. Zodiac signs are based on how the sun moves north and south of the equator. That doesn't happen unless you're observing the sun from the earth, geocentrically. Nakshatra constellations are based on how the stars look from the earth. If you went to some other place in space and looked at the stars, you wouldn't see them in the same patterns and configurations that we see them in from Earth. The house system, the 12 houses, it's all based on how the zodiac signs intersect our horizons. So that's only observable from Earth. Even the things that are symbolized by the planets are symbolized by those planets because of the way the planets appear from Earth. The brightness that they have in our sky, the color that they have in our sky, the way they appear to move and the speeds that they move at, etc. Astrology itself is inherently geocentric in its soul. Why? Because whether you believe in astrology or not, you should be able to historically recognize that the subject of astrology was conceived of as a means for the universe and the gods in the universe to convey information to humans living on Earth, not to solar flares on the sun or not to craters on the moon, to sentient human beings living on Earth. Therefore, the whole entire system of astrology is all about the universe as humans see it from Earth. In short, just to sum this all up in one sentence or two sentences, astrology is not illusory or inferior just because it's geocentric. It's intentionally geocentric because it's meant for humans who live on Geos, the Earth. One other topic which came up in Neil deGrasse Tyson's podcast, the Star Talk thing, was the idea that retrogression, like basically all of astrology, is a real silly thing. In fact, I really hated the way this was put forward. He has his male cohort, and the two of them are condescendingly implying that astrology and the interpretation of retrogression is something that annoying girlfriends do. So it's so silly, isn't it? It can be silly. Astrology can definitely be silly. Let's not kid ourselves. Every component of astrology can become silly when you use it in a silly way. Mercury retrogression, for example, somehow gets a lot of press and therefore a lot of flack from the mainstream non-believers in astrology. The basic interpretive nature of a Mercury retrogression is, since Mercury is a planet that governs communication or represents communication, when it goes retrograde, it means there's going to be struggles involving communication. That's true. But like any factor in astrology, a Mercury retrogression is one out of dozens, if not hundreds of factors that you have to combine together into one picture before you make any reasonable interpretation of what's actually going to happen. The current Mercury retrogression that we're in right now is a very good example of this, because this one really is acting like a Mercury retrogression is supposed to act. In other words, we're really seeing challenges to communication both on a personal level and on a social level, the way the media is working. But not every Mercury retrogression is going to present these effects. It depends on how that one factor interacts with all the other factors. So currently what you have is Mercury retrogression occurring in Cancer, which is a difficult sign for communication in the first place because Cancer is private and emotional. Furthermore, when you get a Mercury retrogression, you get a combustion, and this combustion has Mercury in 4 degrees south of the sun, so it's called a subordinate combustion, where Mercury really gets dominated. And on top of it all, the other planet of information, which is Jupiter, is also retrogressed, and it's debilitated. And then another thing on top of the cake is that you have Mars aspecting Mercury, so you get so much injection of passion into the way the communication malfunctions are happening. So the point I'm trying to make is, when all of the factors combine, you get an outcome that's sure or archetypical or strong. And when factors don't really combine and point in the same direction, then you don't get very sure or clear or textbook outcomes. And what I hope this might illustrate is that when astrology is done systematically, then it actually functions as a reasonable science with reasonable verifiability. Astrology doesn't deserve to be dismissed by people like Neil deGrasse Tyson in such a misinformed manner and with such flawed logic that doesn't even correctly grasp the coexistence of relative truths in a single objective reality.